Hello, my name is Lina Abarafi. I'm the Executive Director of the Arab Institute for Women at the Lebanese American University. I'm also a 20-year veteran of humanitarian aid work, working to end sexual violence in places like Afghanistan, Congo, Central African Republic, Haiti, Nepal, Chad. So I've had a fair run around the world. Now for the last 6 years have been at the helm of the Arab Institute for Women, which is a 48-year-old hybrid that is both academic and activist, and it covers the 22 Arab states. It's an extraordinary place that espouses the feminist leadership that I'm here to talk to you about today. What I want to do is set the global context first, because it's important to understand what the world really looks like for women today, because we can't actually change what we can't see, and we can't fight what we don't understand. So this is just to illustrate and to make the case. And once we see these kinds of things, it becomes impossible to unsee them. I think this is what galvanizes us, what fuels us, what makes us angry, and what propels change. Because if there was ever a case for feminist leadership and its need, now it is what I'm about to tell you. We know that no country in the world has achieved equality for women. In every single place and in every single space, women have less choice, less voice, less opportunity, less access to resources, and we are still not able to fully participate in all aspects of public, political, social, economic life. It is unbelievable that we are still talking about equality, and we have failed to achieve it. And what's more, achieving equality, working on gender equality, working on women's rights, fighting for women's fundamental freedoms is actually viewed as women's work. So here we are in it, trying to rectify the imbalance that we did not even create. So what we do know is this, though: the case is strong and it's everywhere. Gender equality is a non-negotiable. It's a human rights imperative. It's a precondition for any kind of world that we want to live in, a world that we deserve to live in, that is safe and just and with respect and dignity and equality and opportunity and abundance. But at the current pace, we're putt-putting along. It's going to take 100 years to close the gender gap. And that's evident across all sectors. Maybe the only promising one is education, where the gender gap will close in a little over 10 years. But at the same time, the majority of students who are out of school are girls. And we're still talking about illiteracy. I can't even believe that nearly 500 million women and girls are illiterate in a world where literacy is really a non-negotiable, a core, a minimum. If we talk about politics, that's where we see the most inequality, and it's made the most visible because women in power in politics, in leadership, in decision-making are rendered virtually invisible. I don't need to tell you how many women leaders there are and how we treat women in any kind of position of leadership as the exception and not as the norm. She's the first, we keep saying. Well, I don't know how much longer we need to keep saying that. And we know that 120 or so countries have actually never had a woman leader. To me, that's astounding. When it comes to violence against women, this is where it pains me the most, because the statistics are there and they underestimate the reality. We say that 1 in 3 women and girls are going to experience some form of violence in their lifetime. And if that's not enough of a case, I don't know what is. In fact, this global form of violence against women, is costing us $1.5 trillion. So imagine what we're doing to ourselves, to the world, to women, as a result of this, and allowing this to continue for me is just unimaginable. The economy, again, we know the case there. Women are unrepresented at all aspects of leadership. They are barely in C-suites, as we say. They are relegated to feminized sectors, to the informal labor market. They do most of the unpaid care work. All of this has gotten worse in the context of COVID. We're living a global emergency. This is a public health pandemic that has affected us all, and women and girls who were already vulnerable prior to the pandemic are now facing increasing challenges. And all of that is made much worse when we look at other intersecting identities like race and class and physical ability and ethnicity and refugee status or whatever. So many different aspects of our identities that make us even more vulnerable already. I work in the Arab region right now, and that happens to be the region that is the worst in terms of social indicators. We need over 150 years to close our gender gap. And with the protracted crises, resurgence of patriarchy, denial of women's fundamental freedoms, economic crises, government collapse, specifically in the case of Lebanon, and compounded by the Beirut blast that decimated half of the city in August, this region is really in dire need. So if there was ever a place to make the case for feminist leadership, it is there. Following the blast in Beirut, I wrote a piece about the possibility that we could rebuild Beirut as the region's first feminist city. And that means providing economic opportunity, reforming the discriminatory laws, ensuring that physical space is designed in a way that includes and engages women and is better for everybody. So my argument was this, that if we can do it in a place like Lebanon, if we can turn Lebanon, a country that is already plagued by vast gender inequalities, into a feminist country with Beirut as its feminist city, I think that would be the most extraordinary accomplishment. So what do I mean actually by feminist leadership? I think the idea is the reform of individuals and institutions, and because the people and the systems both need to change if we're going to have the world that we'd like to see. That's the core of feminist leadership. So it's not about formal leadership. It's not about politics or power. It's not that feminist leaders are just female leaders. There is a different type of leadership that we're advocating for. That we're talking about a sea change. We're talking about dismantling the systems and the structures that have contributed to marginalization and oppression, not just for women, but for just about everyone. This isn't about providing services and just doing more and adding on. It's not about technical solutions, because these are fundamental political structural problems. We need to reform, we need to dismantle, we need to disrupt the entire system. It's about providing opportunities. It's about choice. It's about voice. It's about change. It's about creating space for a new generation of young leaders that are already out there fighting the fight. They're the ones that are going to finish the job that we've been unable to finish as the older generation. And when I look at them, I think, oh, I can't wait to retire, because they're doing such an extraordinary job. Their movements are so inspiring and encouraging. I look at Chilean feminists chanting, "The rapist is you." I look at Arab feminists on the street, young women who are leading the charge for change. These are the kinds of things that inspire me. So it's not just about formal leadership. It's not just the Trudeaus and the Jacinda Arderns, although they are both amazing, and they're really doing their part for their countries and for the world to model the kind of leadership that we want. But it's about these decentralized movements. It starts with the individual, it turns into the collective, because feminist leadership for me is real leadership. It's about a movement, it's about a value system, it is global. It helps us see our own role in the wider ecosystem, helps us understand our place, our role, our responsibility, the duty we have to ourselves and each other for change. It's about agency, it's about ownership, it's about authenticity, it's about courage, collaboration, connection, community. It's power sharing, it's transformative, it's egalitarian, it's thoughtful, it's disruptive, certainly. It's a paradigm shift. That's what we want, because the status quo is no longer good enough. What we want is to learn and also to unlearn the better ways of doing things that are going to benefit everyone, and this is needed now more than ever. What's been interesting to see is a couple of phenomena that have driven this. Social media certainly plays a big role as a driver. And what that means is it's got the potential to mobilize people, to mobilize attention, accountability, and ultimately action. But social media is not the answer. You know, a hashtag doesn't necessarily translate into real change. And there's a downside to social media as well, in that it's bringing new forms of discrimination and violence against women in particular. So how do we use these structures that we have to be able to fuel our movements without harming ourselves further? There's also a rise of a social purpose, where we are more conscious consumers, where we put our money where our values are, where we are careful about who we support and what that means and what that does for the world. And if that aligns with our purpose and our values, that is very powerful, because that has the potential to dismantle massive corporations. We need to use that power wisely. When we talk about feminist leadership in political space and more formal structures, one good example is feminist foreign policy. So that means aligning the country's values and the direction of the country with the leadership. So this is a government policy. It is driven by feminist politicians and hopefully backed by a feminist populace. It's centered on human rights, on dignity, on equality. And there's a big emphasis, obviously, on women's rights as human rights as a guiding principle for feminist foreign policy. It's intersectional, clearly. It is a new understanding of power that has the potential to be radically transformative in every space. It's about peace, it's about security, it's about development, it's about progress, not just for women, but for everyone. And it recognizes that we have to dismantle the old structures if we're going to build something new, because these were the structures: racism, sexism, misogyny, patriarchy, the stuff that was holding us back before. It centers people and their lives. It focuses on peace, not just as the absence of war, but a real, sustainable, meaningful peace. It's about agency. It is about a country and ultimately a world that is built by all of us and for all of us. So that's really radical in the way that it changes the way we think about how a country can govern and set an example. So in terms of feminist leadership that these feminist foreign policies are espousing, it's about participation, collaboration, accountability, humility, a really interesting word in that sense. It's about modeling feminist principles and purpose at a micro and a macro scale. It is about a shared vision. It's about challenging patriarchal norms. It is about values. It is about setting examples. It is about building relationships that are based on trust and respect and opportunity. It's about personal and collective care. All of these things can translate also into the workplace. So in an office, in another space, what might that mean? In any space that we all occupy, we need to ask ourselves, who is at the table? Who's doing the talking? Who's doing the deciding? Who's absent? Whose voices do we need? It's about challenging those structures all the time. It's about dispelling the myth of meritocracy. No, the system actually isn't fair. We have to fix the system because it's fundamentally flawed. Power can be shared. Power is not a pizza. It is something that we all have the ability to access and need the ability to claim. It is about dignity. It's about respect. It's about modeling the right kind of behavior that ultimately will be contagious. This is about building a better world for everyone, and your behavior as an individual matters. So it's not just about being a senior person in politics or in the workplace or anything. It is about changing yourself so we can change the rules. It's also about things like temporary special measures that discriminate positively in favor of women, like quotas, because things won't evolve on their own. We need to rectify a historic imbalance, and to do that, we need to make sure that women have a seat. And that means creating the space to level the playing field, to take account of this historic disadvantage and fix it, because otherwise we're waiting for evolution. And I personally will not wait 100 years for the gender gap to close by itself. I don't know if anyone else is planning to be around. I'd like to fast track this because I think there's nothing more important than this right now. But at the same time, when we talk about the presence of women, that doesn't necessarily mean power for women. So we need to make that distinction and make sure that the presence is meaningful and that the environment is enabling. And women not just have a seat, but they have a voice, they have space, they have respect. All of those things are important. And at the same time, it's not just about politics and work. It's about how you espouse feminist leadership at home, because if your feminism is just 9 to 5, it's not real feminism. So unless you have absorbed it and applied it in every aspect of your life, that's the real leadership for me. You cannot switch it off at 5 p.m. when the day is done. It is a 24/7 thing. Once you put those lenses on, you will never be able to take them off. It's also about encouraging feminist funding. What we say right now is we have the so-called localization agenda, another buzzword that I don't care about at all because it renders quite hollow. What it is trying to emphasize is the funding of local women's groups, feminist groups on the front lines that are doing the work, that have always been doing the real work, that will do the work long after everybody else leaves. And yet we don't do that. We provide short-term, restricted, structured funding that is short in terms of its vision, short in terms of its dollars, short in terms of its duration, and does not provide the kind of opportunity for these feminist groups to sustain, much less to scale. So we are actually depriving them of the opportunity to grow and to survive. So I think we really need to change the funding modalities and look at what feminist funding really means and how we can use our dollars and allocate our dollars in a way that is meaningful. Because what we know across the board is the status quo isn't good enough. I don't think there's anybody that will argue, well, maybe there is, but certainly not me. And I think we've flooded the world with all of these good arguments about equality and why that's important for all of us everywhere. We talk about economic arguments like more prosperity if more women are brought in. We talk about political arguments like peace and progress and all types of things. But really, for me, the underlying thing is about principle. Feminist leadership is about principle, and now is the time to do it. It's a non-negotiable. It's about the systems and the structures that need to be reestablished to serve us all. Change is happening too slow, and I believe that change is possible. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to get up every day, and I do wake up every day for this. So the case for feminist leadership is strong, and I would call on all of us to look inside and ask ourselves, am I aligned with my purpose? What am I doing in the world, and what am I doing for the world? Am I a leader, and how do I manifest that leadership, and how do I hold up a mirror for others to see their own leadership? Do I share power? How do I use my voice for myself to say what needs to be said, and how do I use my voice in service of others? And am I working to reform the processes, the systems, and the structures, and the institutions that held us back but now need to hold us high? So I would say that feminist leadership is about building a better world for women, and it's a world that we all deserve now. Thank you.